What would you do if your loved one was dying and your entire family walked out on them? I was 17, broke, terrified. And while they chose the exit, I chose to stay. 7 years later, I didn't just save him, I built a life none of them saw coming. When the doctor said the treatment would cost over $95,000 with less than a 15% chance of survival, the room didn't erupt. No tears, no arguments, just silence. Then my mother crossed her arms, let out a breath like she'd been holding it for years, and said, "Well, James was a soldier. He'd understand when it's time to retreat." And just like that, they left. Her, my Uncle Todd, Aunt Melanie, even my cousin Eric, who didn't say a single word, just looked down at his phone and walked out behind them. The automatic doors closed behind their tailored coats and polished shoes, and I was left behind. 17, flat broke, terrified. But I stayed. I stayed because James Lane wasn't just some old man on a hospital bed. He was my grandfather. The man who showed up at every science fair, even the one where I set the project table on fire. The man who let me cry into his shoulder the night my dad bailed for good. The man who once drove 4 hours just to bring me a jacket because Mom forgot I had an overnight trip. He was the only person who ever looked at me like I was enough, and I was not going to let him die alone. The nurse stood beside me, her clipboard shaking slightly in her hands. "Are you Harper Lane?" I nodded, my mouth couldn't form words. "We'll need someone to sign financial responsibility. Insurance barely covers 30%. Without treatment..." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. I signed. Every single form. My hands trembled so much I could barely hold the pen. It felt like signing away my future, because in a way, I was. I handed over my entire college savings, $12,743, from scholarships, tutoring after school, babysitting, scraping every dime since I was 13. Then I did what I never imagined I'd have to do. I called the hospital's HR department and begged for any job. By 6 p.m., I was mopping floors in the pediatric wing. By 10 p.m., I was back at Grandpa's bedside, watching the machines blink like a slow, tired heartbeat. He didn't wake up for 4 days. And every day, I sat there, reading out loud, talking about the weather, pretending everything was normal. Because the thought of him waking up and realizing no one had stayed, that broke me more than the bills. When his eyes fluttered open, his voice was nothing more than a whisper. But it was enough. "You stayed," he said, blinking up at me through watery eyes. "I did," I said, gripping his hand. "I always will." That night, as the city lights blinked outside and nurses moved through the hallway like ghosts, something shifted inside me. They thought they were walking away from a dying man. But what they really left was time. Time to grow, time to heal, time to become someone they would never understand. Hospitals are strange at night, too quiet to feel alive, too loud to feel like rest. The monitors beeped in uneven rhythms, and every few seconds, a pump somewhere hissed like it had something to say but didn't know how to finish the sentence. That's what I remember most about those first few days, the silence between the machines, the waiting, the helplessness, the fear that maybe love wouldn't be enough. Grandpa hadn't spoken since he opened his eyes that first night, but he knew I was there. I could see it in the way his fingers curled slightly when I held his hand, in the way his lips moved even when he couldn't form words. So I stayed. After my janitor shift, I returned to room 211. I read aloud from a battered old copy of Popular Mechanics we'd once found at a thrift shop. I played old radio shows on my phone, the ones he used to love from when he was a kid. And when I had nothing left to say, I just sat there and listened to his breathing. That, too, was a kind of language. By day 3, the doctors called it a stall in deterioration, but I called it hope. And on the 4th morning, as I spoon-fed him lukewarm broth, he blinked slowly, smacked his lips, and croaked, "Needs salt." I froze. "Grandpa?" He turned his head, weak but smiling. "You've always been terrible at seasoning." I laughed, harder than I had in weeks. I didn't care that I was still in scrubs, covered in floor wax and cafeteria soup. I didn't care that I'd slept for only 2 hours sitting in a chair. He was back. Not fully, not steadily, but back enough to tease me, and that was more medicine than any IV. From then on, every improvement was a small miracle. He moved a toe, then a leg. He lifted a hand to scratch his nose. One night, as I was falling asleep on the edge of the bed, he reached out and pulled the blanket up to cover me. "Can't have you catching a cold," he muttered. I nearly cried. The nurses began calling him the comeback kid. I started taking notes on his medications, tracking progress, even watching YouTube videos about physical therapy and nutrition. It became our project, our little rebellion against statistics. He wasn't supposed to live, but he did. And in those quiet nights, between scrub shifts and spoonfuls of soup, I realized something. They didn't just leave him behind. They left me behind too. And instead of collapsing under that weight, I was building something. Not just a recovery, not just a routine, but a bond deeper than bloodlines, sharper than resentment. One made of shared silence, slow victories, and 1,000 tiny acts of staying. The apartment was barely bigger than a shoebox, peeling paint, a heater that wheezed like it had asthma, a single bedroom, a shared bathroom down the hall, and a kitchen sink that rattled every time you turned the faucet. But it was ours. Grandpa called it a fixer-upper with character. I called it the only place that didn't feel like a countdown. We moved in 2 weeks after he was discharged. I wheeled him up the stairs, no elevator, and we stood in the doorway, staring into this patchwork of cracked tiles, flickering lights, and secondhand furniture. And then he said something I'll never forget. "This place doesn't need locks, Harper. No one's coming to take anything from us, because what we have, we built ourselves." That first night, we slept on floor mattresses and ate microwave noodles. He watched me burn the soup. I watched him smile at the mess. It was perfect. By day, I scrubbed floors and handed out forms at the hospital supply desk. By night, I took GED classes online in the corner of the living room, using a borrowed laptop from the community center. And in between, he taught me. Not math or science like you'd expect from a former engineer, but how to fix things, real things. The old lamp a neighbor tossed in the hallway, a toaster someone left by the dumpster, a clock radio from 1982 that screamed static louder than music. We didn't have a workbench, just a plastic folding table and one drawer filled with salvaged screws, wires, and duct tape. But Grandpa's eyes lit up like a kid's every time we opened something that was supposed to be dead. "You see this resistor?" he'd say, holding up a tiny burnt-out piece. "Most people think it's garbage, but it just needs a little help, like people." I didn't know it then, but he wasn't just fixing appliances, he was rewiring me. Every time I soldered a connection, every time I flipped a switch and saw the light come back on, it felt like reclaiming something I never knew was mine. Confidence, curiosity, belonging. He told me I had an engineer's mind. I laughed and said, "I'm a janitor with a YouTube addiction." But deep down, I let those words nest inside me. No one had ever said I could be something before. One night, after I managed to get an old coffee maker working again, he slid a notebook across the table. Inside were pages of hand-drawn schematics, a wearable fall sensor, a motion alert system, an idea he never finished when he retired. "I never had the right partner," he said softly, "until now." We didn't talk about the family, not really. He didn't insult them, didn't rage or rant. All he said one evening, as he handed me a soldering iron, was, "Some people only love when it's easy, but you love even when it's work." That night, I looked around our tiny kitchen, light flickering overhead, wires spread across the counter, 2 bowls of reheated stew, and felt something I hadn't in years. Home. Not the kind built with bricks and walls, but the kind built with trust, with staying power, and with 2 stubborn hands that refused to let go. It started with a hairdryer. Mrs. Calderon, our neighbor 2 doors down, knocked one night holding the thing like it was a bomb. "Harper," she said, eyes wide, "I heard you fixed a toaster. Think you can save this? It's older than my grandkids." I looked at Grandpa. He gave me a nod. 15 minutes, 2 screws, and a bit of rewiring later, it came back to life with a low, wheezy purr. She was overjoyed, left us a bag of oranges and a hug that nearly cracked my ribs. The next week, someone else came by with a broken fan, then a blender, then a lamp. Word spread. We didn't have a sign, didn't advertise. But our tiny kitchen table became a repair shop. People dropped off things wrapped in towels, grocery bags, even pillowcases. And we never charged a dime. Until one day, Grandpa stopped me. He was sitting in his usual spot, a flashlight wedged between his shoulder and chin, carefully adjusting the prongs of a bent plug. "You're good," he said plainly. "Better than I was at your age." I laughed. "I'm just copying your notes." He looked up. "No, you see things. That's different." Then he added, "But you can't build a future on favors, Harper. People want to pay for value. Let them." I hesitated. I wasn't sure what we were building yet, but I trusted him. So I printed a paper sign, "Home Fix for Hope, pay what you can." Within a month, we had a shoebox full of wrinkled bills and thank you notes. I used some of the money to buy new tools. Grandpa cried when I surprised him with a digital multimeter. "This thing's fancier than the one we had at NASA," he joked. And then the message came. It was from my mother. Not a call, not even a voice memo, just a text. "We've closed your joint account. You made your decision. Don't come looking for help." No apology, no explanation, just deletion. The family phone plan disconnected. Aunt Melanie blocked me on Facebook. Eric unfollowed me, like erasing me digitally would make me vanish in real life. I stared at my screen for a long time that night. Then I powered it off, slid it into a drawer, and picked up my soldering iron. I chose this. This mess, this apartment, this love that asked for effort, not performance. Grandpa must have sensed it. He didn't ask about the message. He just poured me a mug of tea, handed me a spool of wire, and said, "Some circuits are meant to carry power through storms. You're one of those." And in that quiet moment, with rain tapping against our window, I understood. They may have disconnected every line they could, but they couldn't break mine. James Lane passed away on a Tuesday morning. The world outside was quiet, as if it knew. The kettle on the stove was still warm. His favorite book was resting face down in his lap. And his pocket watch, still ticking, lay beside a half-sipped cup of chamomile tea. No machines, no alarms, just peace. I sat there for a long time holding his hand. Not because I didn't know what to do, but because I wasn't ready to live in a world without his voice. His funeral was small. A few neighbors, 2 nurses from the rehab center, and 1 intern from our home fix project. Just the kind of goodbye he would have wanted. Quiet, honest, real. Then they arrived. Sharp heels clicked on the gravel like gunshots. Dark suits, sunglasses, perfume strong enough to make the flowers flinch. My mother, my uncle, my cousin Eric, they looked around like tourists in someone else's grief. "Harper, sweetheart," Mom said, stretching out her arms like the past 6 years hadn't happened. "You've grown into such a capable young woman." I didn't move, didn't speak. She tried again. "Your grandfather, he would have wanted us together for this." I nodded toward the chapel. "He's inside. You have 5 minutes." After the service, as I folded donation slips and packed up leftover programs, she returned, this time with that pinched smile I knew too well. "So," she said lightly, "about the estate. I assume there's a will. James wasn't careless." I met her gaze, calm and even. "There is." Her smile widened like a trap snapping open. "Perfect. We'll want to discuss how things will be divided." That was when I finally spoke. "You left him," I said quietly. "You left him in a hospital bed and didn't visit for 6 years. You never called. You never asked if he lived. And now you're here because you think he was worth something." She blinked, just once, but it cracked something. Her voice sharpened. "Don't be dramatic. You're still his granddaughter, but we're his children. He wouldn't cut us out." I looked down at the envelope in my hands. Sealed, stamped, notarized, already with his lawyer. "You'll find out tomorrow," I said. "But just know, he wasn't nearly as forgiving as I am." The next morning I arrived 15 minutes early at the law office. Not out of nerves, but because I'd been preparing for this for years. Mr. Dawes, Grandpa's attorney, greeted me like an old friend. He'd helped us file Home Fix's LLC paperwork, and now he'd help close this chapter. The conference room smelled like leather chairs and old truths. At the center of the table sat a small wooden box, the one Grandpa told me never to open until this moment. Minutes later, they arrived. No one said hello, they just sat, tense, waiting. Mr. Dawes cleared his throat. "This is the last will and testament of James W. Lane, dated and witnessed on his 90th birthday." He looked at me. "Harper, you may open the box now." Inside, his pocket watch, a flash drive, and a handwritten note. I slid the drive to Mr. Dawes. A soft click. The screen lit up with Grandpa's face, weathered, steady, and unmistakably sure of himself. "If you're hearing this, I'm gone. And if the people I suspect are in this room, well, you never disappoint." My uncle shifted. My cousin rolled his eyes. Grandpa continued. "I, James W. Lane, leave the entirety of my estate, personal assets, home fix intellectual property, and savings accounts to my granddaughter, Harper Lane." The room fell silent, then chaos. "This isn't legal," my mother snapped. "She was with him every day. Who knows what she told him?" Mr. Dawes calmly lifted a folder. "Mr. Lane passed full cognitive evaluations prior to recording this. No signs of manipulation. His wishes are clear." And then, on the video, Grandpa said the words that made everything still. "She gave me 6 more years. She gave me purpose. You gave me absence. She stayed. You walked away." No one spoke. Until I did. I reached into my bag and slid an envelope across the table. This was his last personal letter, not legal, just true. My mother opened it. 3 words. "You walked away." Her hand trembled, but for once she had nothing to say. And in that silence, I finally heard the sound of a legacy being claimed, not with noise, but with truth. I didn't throw a party. I didn't buy a car or fly off to some island with palm trees and umbrella drinks. Instead, I walked back into the apartment, still smelled like solder and tea, still had Grandpa's chair by the window, still had the watch on the table ticking at 7:00 a.m. sharp. The inheritance felt heavy, not because of its size, but because of what it meant. It wasn't mine to spend, it was mine to build with. So I did. We rented a room at the East Denver Community Center, concrete floors, 2 folding tables, and 3 donated laptops. I bought tools with the first grant check. We called it the Lane Workshop, named after Grandpa. And after every quiet night, we built something with our bare hands and too much hope. Our mission was simple: teach teens and elders who'd been left behind how to fix electronics, radios, lamps, small motors, and maybe themselves. The first student? A girl named Talia, age 15. Her mom worked 3 jobs. Her dad wasn't around. She barely spoke above a whisper. But after 2 weeks, she built her own basic fall sensor, same idea Grandpa and I once dreamed up on a napkin. And when it lit up with a tiny blue blink, she jumped out of her chair and shouted, "It actually works!" That moment, that click in her chest, that was him living on. We didn't care if people had experience. We didn't care if they had a resume, a degree, a family. All we asked was this: are you willing to try again? They came from shelters, from halfway houses, from homes that didn't feel like homes. They came with shaky hands, rusty confidence, and stories that echoed mine. We didn't have walls in the traditional sense. Our workshop spilled into the hallway, into donated garages, into public libraries, anywhere someone wanted to learn how to hold a tool instead of holding their breath. Some fixed microwaves, some fixed fans, some just needed to fix their sense of worth. One woman, Marcy, 64, spent 2 hours trying to rewire an old coffee pot. When she got it working, she cried. "First thing I've brought back to life since my husband passed," she whispered. I handed her a rag and smiled. That's what we do here. We bring things back. Over time, the workshop grew, not just in size, but in soul. A retired electrician taught evening classes. A local tech company donated Raspberry Pi kits. We added coding sessions, mentorship circles, even a fridge full of sandwiches no one had to ask permission to eat. We didn't just hand people tools, we gave them permission to rebuild. And every time someone stood up straighter after fixing something simple, I saw Grandpa in their smile. He once told me, "Success isn't about proving anyone wrong. It's about proving to yourself you were right to keep going." That's what the workshop became, a place to keep going. No gates, no judgment, just wires, and people willing to connect them again. 7 years. That's how long it's been since I stood in that hospital hallway, broke, scared, 17. Since I watched my mother walk away without looking back. Since I signed my name on a line that changed everything. Now? Now I wake up at 6:45 every morning. I boil the kettle. I feed the workshop's cat. His name's Resistor. And at exactly 7 a.m., I wind Grandpa's pocket watch. Same way he did. Same number of turns. Click, click, click. It doesn't keep perfect time anymore, but it doesn't need to. It keeps purpose. The apartment still smells like solder and tea. The chair by the window is still there. And the blueprint we sketched on the back of a pizza box? Framed above my desk. The Lane Workshop now runs in 3 cities. We've trained over 600 students, some now teaching others, some working in tech, some just finally believing they're worth showing up for. We don't just hand out certificates, we hand out chances. And every success story, every click of a working device, every quiet smile of someone who fixed what they were told to throw away, feels like one more breath he gave me. One more moment where I know. He didn't just leave me a will, he left me a way. I don't talk to my family. Not out of anger, not anymore, just clarity. They taught me something too, that walking away is easy. Staying changes things. Staying rewires broken connections. Staying creates new circuits. Stronger, stranger, more human. Sometimes, late at night, I think about the version of me that might have left that hospital. The girl who almost didn't sign the papers. The one who almost gave up. And then I look around at what's here now. The laughter from the workshop down the hall. The light above the sink that still flickers but no one minds. The thank you notes stuck to the fridge with mismatched magnets. And I realize this isn't revenge, this isn't even redemption. It's legacy. Not in legal documents, not in bank accounts, but in people, in peace, in knowing that what we built will outlive both of us. And when the day comes that I pass on that pocket watch to someone else, maybe a girl who stayed after everyone else left, maybe a boy who thinks he has nothing left to offer, I'll tell them what he told me. You stayed, you built, and now it's yours. Click, click, click. The clock still ticks, and so do I. What if the very moment they walked away was the exact moment I became everything they said I couldn't be? They thought I'd break, they thought I'd vanish, but I stayed. And from that silence, I built a life with meaning, purpose, and people who never saw me as disposable. I didn't need revenge to win, I just needed the strength to keep showing up. Because sometimes the sweetest ending isn't about what you gain, it's about who you become when no one's watching. And if you've ever been left behind, know this: you are not broken, you are just getting started. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe for more true stories of quiet strength, bold healing, and the power of staying when it matters most. This is Sweet Revenge, Happy Ending, where healing wins and legacy lives on.